Is my camera here? Where's my camera?
Gail's showing you.
Oh, okay, Gail's got me. All right. Very exciting.
Okay, 20 seconds.
What's the name of the title? What's the name of the show again?
Voices from the Village.
No.
Jewish activism and worldview.
Ah, okay.
10 seconds, folks.
All right. Mine's in the room.
Yes.
So I don't.
Quiet, please. Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Steve Place, and welcome to this edition of Voices from the Village. Voices from the Village is really Santa Cruz's longest running live issues program. Been running now for about 17 years. It was started way back by Charlie Fox, who's gone now, but we wanted to kind of keep that tradition alive, and it's important to kind of get people in to discuss really important issues. And the great work really is being done by folks in the community. Today we'll be talking about Jewish activism, the world view. And I've really been looking forward to this particular conversation because there is much about the progressive Jewish movement, social movement that I don't know. And so I learned quite a bit just by kind of doing a little research into the wonderful website that Hada Shemenu has. But we'll find out much more this evening. My guests are all members of Hada Shemenu, so I'm really pleased to have them. Gary Baruch Dalowitz, who is the president of the board. Akindele Bankole. Akindele, welcome. Louise Drummond, welcome back. Well, Louise has been with us a couple of different times in shows. And Rabbi Eli Cohen. Rabbi, you serve as the spiritual leader of Hada Shemenu. So why don't you start by sharing with our viewers kind of your background a little, because I know that you were with the Public Defender's Office. Yeah. You were a graduate of Hastings. But how you got involved in Hada Shemenu and kind of a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I was drawn many years ago while I was doing the other work, doing public defender work. I was really drawn to what one might call tikkun hanefesh, tikkun olam. There's a healing work of the soul and a healing work in the world. And they're different and the same. So I was finding myself really being drawn to the work of Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, who is affectionately known as Reb Zalman. And he really was able to bridge worlds. One of the things he used to say is the only way we're going to get it together is together.
Yeah, beautiful.
And
so
how
true.
do we stay rooted in who we are while learning from other traditions or other streams of Judaism, from other wisdom paths? So I found myself being drawn increasingly towards that even while I was doing my regular work as a public defender. So yeah, that's how I came to it.
And Gary Baruch Dalowitz, you were the president of the board. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I'm sure the viewers would be interested in that, and how you got involved with Hada Shemenu.
Yeah, I think if I reflect on the roots of my involvement, I'd have to go back to my childhood, growing up in Brooklyn, and my grandmother, who was in the Yiddish theater in New York City, in Lower East Side, and being part of that world and being able to view those performances in a language I didn't really understand, but was so alive and so vibrant, it really touched me. I think after, as I grew older, I kind of moved away from Judaism because what I was exposed to in New York tended to be dogmatic and exclusive and kind of pushed people of different faiths away. But I was later drawn to Jewish renewal, and actually it was the same Reb Zalman who got me really interested, because he was so inclusive and so teaching a Judaism that truly embraced all people and put those values of caring, love thy neighbor as thyself, for instance, into action. And so the group here in Santa Cruz embodied that, and embodied a lot of those values, and then I became more and more active. Yeah.
Well, wonderful. It's great to have you. And Ikindele Bankole, not only a member of Hadashimenu, but also a local restaurateur. So just mention that just briefly before you tell us, as if you explain something about yourself, please.
Well, yes. Our new restaurant is actually called Veg on the Edge. So it's at Abbott Square. And so it's vegan, gluten-free, and also kosher.
Oh,
so,
for goodness sakes.
So that's really important also for us. For me, my journey to Judaism started because I was born in Germany myself. And so I was kind of aware of the Holocaust. And so in the 90s, when Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated in Israel, I really started following Israel politics and so on. And then I didn't know how I would get more involved with the Jewish people until I actually met Rabbi Eli about 13 years ago. And then I got to know about Jewish renewal. And I thought that's a more progressive, a more forward-thinking branch of Judaism. And to me, it seems like that's where the world is going. You know, we are moving forward towards a more inclusive way of being together. And so that just really triggered something in me. So that's been an exciting journey for me. Also having met Rabbi Zalman, he was a delight. So it's been great for me. Just
Wonderful.
being part
It
of
does
this
sound
community.
like a marvelous journey. And Louise, you have been with us before when we've had shows on the Freedom Sleepers, local grassroots activist group supporting the houseless folks in town, with your partner, Rabbi Phil Posner, who I like to call the good rabbi. He's with us today. So, well, the pretty good rabbi. Anyway.
Pretty good.
But Louise, really, tell us how you were involved. I know that you're on the board roster as well, I saw.
Right.
But tell us how you got involved with Hadashimenu, and a little bit about yourself. Maybe people don't know as much as they'd like to about Louise Drummond.
Oh, well, Louise Drummond was raised in a very conservative Christian tradition that I left because I eventually couldn't handle the mythology. And then, well, I participated in church because I thought that sermons about love did me well, because it was ever so easy for me to be selfish and so on with other people if I weren't reminded about being good. So, and then 9/11 happened, and I was so affected by it, and I thought that the strike against the Twin Towers was a symbolic strike against Judaism, because of the myth that Jews are so involved in the financial community. And I thought I had to do something. I had to do something. That it was my opening up toward Tikkun Olam, toward healing the world. And eventually, I had the chance to convert with a very enlightened rabbi. And when we came here to Santa Cruz, I was invited to Hadesh Yameinu services because my stepson attended. And I was very drawn toward the closeness of the community and toward Rabbi Eli's ministry, which is so full of beautiful music and love and this generosity of spirit that he has.
Wonderful.
I was going to the other synagogue in town too, but eventually I just wanted to go to Kadesh Yemenu.
Wonderful. That's great. And I want to remind everyone that this is a live call-in show, so if you have questions for any of the panelists as we continue throughout the evening, 425-8848, extension 630, 425-8848, extension 630. I wanted to ask generally, when I was kind of looking at the general landscape of Jewish progressive thought, the Jewish progressive movement, I did see that there was a national movement called Amenu. How do you have any relationship with them? Because I noticed that they had, they're very active in what things that they're doing.
There are many national Jewish organizations of a progressive bent. Certainly the Reform movement, who we've learned a lot from as activists. There are more the organizations more directly involved in political action. Our national organization is called Aleph, A-L-E-P-H, Aleph.org, I think it is. And it is the umbrella group for Jewish renewal communities across the country and around the world. And each community is a little different. Some might emphasize more the spiritual, some emphasize more the interfaith, some emphasize more the activist approach. Some are very rabbi-centered, some are much more broadly arranged over their congregants. So there's a lot of flexibility in it.
As we mentioned at the beginning of the show, when I Googled Rabbi Eli Cohen, it says Rabbi Eli Cohen serves as spiritual leader of Hadesh Menu, the Jewish renewal community of Santa Cruz. So if you would all kind of explain to our viewers kind of what form that takes in Santa Cruz, because Santa Cruz is certainly a place that cherishes diversity, cherishes inclusiveness, and that's one of our great community values. So to have an organization in our community that's doing this work is really very exciting and very gratifying.
Wonderful. Well, I don't want to take over the conversation.
No, but people can jump in with whatever they have. Of course.
Well, Jewish renewal is sometimes seen as a movement akin to the larger and earlier movements, such as the conservative reform movements and so forth. And sometimes it's a small m, a movement that happens within those other ones. Reb Zalman would often speak of what is needed for the emerging paradigm. And some things are best learned from, but then left in the archives, and some things are needed to be brought forward. So there are things he felt very strongly that we need to learn from the other branches, so he would call us either post-denominational or trans-denominational, because we're learning from the other branches. But also, he felt very strongly we needed to learn from the wisdom paths of other traditions. Many of our own members, many Jews, young and older, have been involved in other faith traditions or have dabbled elsewhere or have explored. And so what is the wisdom they're bringing back, and how can we integrate that? So there's a strong emphasis on inclusivity. I'd say there's also a very strong drawing on Jewish mysticism, what's often called Kabbalah or Kabbalah. So that's very big for us. And then I'd say, lastly, it emphasizes joy a lot. There have been many periods of Jewish history and Jewish prayer practice that have moved away from the more joyful expression, and so that's been really important for us too.
And Gary, you share your views on really the work of really in the community, really, of Hadesh Menu.
I was going to elaborate on on the idea that what really brings me in is how the services can include aspects like poems from the Sufi tradition, from Rumi, or meditations that maybe draw upon Eastern approaches to spirituality, and I've been able to weave a tapestry that brings in like lots of different strands, and that's very inviting for me. I mean, for me personally, I spent, when I moved away from Judaism, a lot of time in Eastern approaches. In fact, I'm a medical doctor who does acupuncture, so I've brought East and West together in my own
You're a very modest
practice.
Man. I never mentioned that.
Well, it's a good way to make a living.
A doctor and a lawyer, and Native American. See if we could have something.
Yeah, see if we can get a whole thing. But so for me, being able to include like meditation approaches, or for instance, we do at the time of the New Year, we do a celebration by the water called Tashlik, and often we bring in like Chinese movement, like Qigong, or at least when I lead it, you know, and so bringing in, and I think what has really made me attracted to it is how welcome all those things, rather than just kind of putting up with different styles. We've really embraced wisdom traditions from around the world.
And Akinda, your thoughts about that? Yeah.
Well, I think for me, I think Jewish renewal becomes this this container where it has got its foundation rooted in Jewish mysticism, the traditions, but also you can bring your own individual self into it. So you're not rejected because you're different, or you're from a different group of people. So you're all embraced, and then you're able to connect. So we have this connect. It's a connection point, Jewish renewal for all of us. So we bring all our different talents in, and then we get to learn. You know, it is so Reb Zalman, truly. I mean, just that's the way he lived his life. You know, being rooted in the foundations of the tradition, and yet being able to embrace all the different people. And I think what it does for me, it makes it so easy not to feel alienated or to feel like I'm less than. So being rooted in this foundation and then having all the differences, you know, you just feel you're connected. You don't have to, for example, I consider myself a Yoruba Jew because I'm Yoruba from Nigeria, West Africa. So I consider myself a Yoruba Jew. And to me, that brings that connection, and also me respecting my own ancestors makes me a better Jew because I have more credibility in respecting the traditions that I'm now a part of.
And again, that's just a wonderful diversity and inclusiveness. It really is one of the church values of our community. Louise, you and I, and Rabbi Phil, one of the founding members of the Freedom Sleepers, again, advocates for the house system in Santa Cruz. And it was through you and Phil, actually, that I first heard about Hadeshimania. And I was really fascinated by the work. I kept getting confused about, well, this Temple Bethel, Hadeshimania is this and that, and I tried to figure it out. And so really this is a revelation for me, and a clarification, frankly, to see the work that people are doing and all the great work they're doing, but, you know, in the ways that they can do it and still collaborate with other things. So tell us about, you know, what you think your daily involvement with Hadeshimania is, because I hear you and Phil talk about it really so often, and you're so engaged with it.
Well, we do a great deal of thinking of what might be good for it, and right at the moment I'm helping to prepare for a fundraiser that we're doing in December on the 17th. It's going to be a concert called Season of Light that we're doing for Hanukkah, and with a wonderful singer and guitarist, and besides that, I'm very involved in the social action committee for those who are not housed. And for instance, we once a month go to give a dinner and companionship.
Absolutely.
To people who in one of the churches, so that they can feel honored and respected, and that's part of that's a part of Judaism. You must honor the stranger, and and then there's my thinking about what the rabbi teaches too, which is loving everybody and. Well, it's this enveloping envelope that I live in.
And certainly, while I'm not Jewish, I would subscribe to the loving everyone, I think, is a good philosophy and outlook. Rabbi Eli, you were mentioning, of course, that you have this fundraiser. I want to hear more about that. And we do have, as you talk about it, we do have a little runner up there so people can get more information. So, yeah, tell us all about that.
Sure. Many people in the community have heard of our entertainers or guest performers, Lisa Feynman and Kimball Hurd. Kimball was involved, I believe, in City Folk and on his own, and Lisa has been a performer for many, many years. I first saw her when she was playing with Tom Paxton years ago.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
For goodness sakes.
In Monterey. She is also serving as a cantor of the synagogue in Carmel. She's just got a warm, gorgeous, sweet voice. She could sing anything and bring you right in, and Kimball, phenomenal musician. And the two of them have offered to do this for us because they believe both in the work that we're doing, they're personally supportive. The concert is also a good way for us to reach out further into the community beyond our own circle. It'll be at the Kumbwa, which
Wonderful
is a big
venue.
deal for us. Yeah, it's a great venue. They've been very kind to us, by the way. And we'll have a wonderful raffle, a beautiful home offered to us in Mexico as a grand prize. But, it's also a way for us to really be a bit more present in the community. A lot of times for a small congregation like ours, we're very internally focused. We're just trying to run day to day or just educate ourselves and do the work that it takes to be a congregation. This helps us be a little bit more present out in the community, along with, as Louise was saying, our Tikkun Olam work, our work in the world.
Right. Yeah. And I did notice as I was looking at your website, and we have that up here as well, cysantacruz.com.
Yes.
So people can take a look at that, really get a lot more information about Hadash Shemenu. And that's the wonderful thing about Voice from the Village. I always reflect that you're going to hear something that you may not be aware of. People doing great work in the community. So I didn't know they were doing that, or I didn't know it was happening. I think people are generally aware that there is quite a bit of progressive thought within the Jewish religion. And socially, I think the social justice element is there as well. But I did notice on the website that you do have some formal programs like a Hebrew school and that kind of thing. So tell our viewers a little bit about kind of the more formal aspects really of your organization.
Well, of course, we have adult education. That's one of our strengths, I believe. We do have a children's program, Hebrew school and holiday programming. We have regular Shabbat, Sabbath services. The first 3 Fridays of every month, we meet at the Vets Hall. So
is that
part
right?
of being really in the community, being well connected that way. We also meet on the second Saturday of every month, and all these things can be found online. But also, the past few years, and like many in the community, especially the past year or so, a lot of people have really stepped forward to try and be more engaged in what's needed in the community. So as Louise was telling you about our involvement with the Interfaith Shelter Suppers, we've also been really important to us. It's not just about bringing a meal, it's about being with people over the meal. But we also have gotten very involved right from the start with Downtown Streets team, which the city has been involved in bringing in.
Yes,
It was really important to us as soon as we heard it. Our Social Action Committee has really embraced this. So we've been involved in getting people to bring, for example, hygiene items that we can then help assemble, and the streets team helps give them out to those in need. Every one of our events between now and Hanukkah, we're going to make sure to have a collection available. So we try and be connected that way. We're involved more broadly with other congregations and individuals in something called the Tent of Abraham, which
I've heard.
Have you heard
Absolutely,
of that?
yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, in fact, we had a show just recently, and Jim Morley was here.
Oh, yes.
And Jim was talking about the Tent of Abraham, and my housemate, Mel Nunes, is very much involved with those kinds of things. And so I always get that information, although I don't get an opportunity to participate as often as I like to. I certainly hear about the good works and that broad kind of tent that's
really important, because for us, I know I'll speak for me personally, but for many in our congregation, it's a big enough task to just do the work of educating ourselves Jewishly, of keeping track of the people who need a phone call or a visit, and like in any congregation community. So it's also very important that we don't lose sight of the broader connections. Tent of Abraham brings people together to help further understanding of the between individuals and communities of the Abrahamic traditions. Right now, we've got a 3-part series. We had one on anti-Semitism. We have another coming up on Islamophobia, and we'll have a third on intolerance of Christians and Christian activism. We're also involved in out in our faith, which Temple Bethel is especially spearheaded, but congregations across the spectrum around being supportive of LGBTQI communities and individuals, and so those are ways we try and act more broadly. But of course, most of our work is a bit more internal.
And it's interesting, and as you describe this, is that I'm one of the coordinators for the Faith Community Shelter, and so we have organizations like your own come in and do the meals, and it's most important. And again, I'll mention my good friend Mel Nunes, who's also a coordinator. He says you don't just serve a meal; you take a meal with them. You sit down, you engage, do that kind of thing. That's so important. That's essential. And that kind of thing. So that is very much appreciated and very much a fundamental aspect of that, what makes that program successful. And in terms of the Downtown Streets team, it's wonderful to engage on that as well, because it can be a pathway to different circumstances for people who are in more reduced circumstances now.
Well, we have some members like Louise and Phil and others who just really help keep that at the forefront of our consciousness. And it's been really important for us. It's been coalescing for us. It's been really good for us to be involved. And at the same time, we have other things that bridge us in a different way. For example, Baruch, Dr. Talowich, has led a number of classes for us, or conversations as well, bridging some of these things. I think we did one on
Please tell us
Chinese
more about that. That would be wonderful.
Jewish archetype.
Oh, yeah, we've had our adult ed tends to be very eclectic and inclusive, and so for instance, a conversation we've had is looking at the Jungian archetypes, like the archetype of the warrior or the king or the queen, but where it might be found in Jewish tradition, but where it's also found within each of us. We each have to find our own warrior, say, to stand up for the causes that are meaningful for us. We each have to find our sage in terms of finding wisdom and such. So so bridging like Jungian thinking and Jewish thought has been an interest of mine.
That's fascinating.
I
have thought about that connection, and it's all about that interconnectivity and stuff like that. Kendall, now, do you also, when they're serving the meals for the Faith Community Shelter, are you participate in that as well as part of Hadash Shemania?
Yes, before opening the restaurant, I certainly had more interaction, and so I've taken some leadership role in different aspects of Hadash Menu. But with the meals, yes, I would actually go in, also cook with some of the other members like Lynn LaRose. So we do the cooking, bring the food in, sit down, do the round before we begin. It was really good. And also getting to meet some of those people, those guests, even out, in the community, and getting to be with them and hang out and stuff was really, it's been amazing.
He's being also a little bit modest in another way,
I'm sure
because
he is, yes.
Again, some of our work is more internal. I know I can speak on behalf of our whole community in appreciation of the work Kindley's done, often behind the scenes, and literally setting things up for us, or planning, or bringing in a beautiful eye to when we don't have our own building. We meet, for example, mostly at the Vets Hall or other times in rented spaces.
Similarly, the local ACLU does not have its own building, so we understand that kind of, sometimes that can be a disconnect, but otherwise, sometimes it can be liberating.
Exactly, it can go both ways, that's right. But a lot of times we're having to set up and take down, and it's taxing.
Yes.
And what Akindle's done with some helpers is to really bring in the beauty in setting up the space. A lot of times we don't realize how we're affected sometimes by simple things like a cloth draped beautifully here and there, or the work that goes into it. People will show up for our high holidays. There are, for us, a big crowd. There'll be hundreds of people, and most completely unaware, although appreciative, I think, but unaware of what goes in to that kind of thing. And for years, Akindle took on coordinating those things. With the restaurant opening, he stepped back a little, but sometimes that's a good thing too, so other people have stepped forward.
Now, is your group, as you move forward, is it what kind of demographic do you have? Is it growing? Is there a way for people who are maybe just finding out about Hadash Menu this evening and are Jewish and would like to become involved in something socially progressive? Is there a way, other than looking through their website, to be able to contribute, to volunteer, to just engage, to become part of this?
We have always welcomed people to connect with us in any way that speaks to them. We have many members who are not Jewish but are interested for various reasons, either because they're drawn to us, maybe it's through a spouse, but maybe it's through their own interest otherwise. We have programs that are often free or very easily accessed, our adult education, certainly our services. We invite people to help us when we do these volunteer things out in the community. I mean, that kind of thing really connects people. So those are some of the ways that people can connect with us.
And I think as I looked at your website, I was looking at the programs, I kept seeing R. Solik on there, Randa Solik. And
Randa, do you know Randa?
Absolutely, Randa is one, and shout out to Randa Solik, who is one of the great community activists in Santa Cruz, and has been so for a long period of time, a wonderful person who is involved in many, many, many different causes, and she's always there for that.
It's interesting you brought that up because you talked about demographics, and Randa and her family is an interesting example because her mother, in her 90s, was one of the oldest bat mitzvahs I ever did. I think she was 90 or 91 when she celebrated
and
her
now bat mitzvah, for people who don't, who aren't...
coming of age in the Jewish tradition.
All right, very good,
and in her 90s, her dear mother Shirley celebrated her bat mitzvah.
Wonderful.
And yet Randa's grandchildren are also involved. Her grandson is in our Hebrew school program, her grandson Jackson. So, and Randa herself has helped us with what we call our Yortzeit coordination. Yortzeits are the anniversary of a passing. That's big in our tradition. The fullness of your life is sometimes measured by your life itself, and we can't know that until the end of our lives. So oftentimes people have you might call it a celebration, an acknowledgement on the anniversary of someone's passing. And we light a candle in remembrance, and we try and mention their names in our services. And Randa's helped us coordinate that, for example. But she's also, I know, involved in many things out in the community. I've seen that. And also, a lot of people don't know she's very involved in balancing a Buddhist and Jewish perspective.
I did not know that. That's interesting.
I would interject. I mean, one of the things that really is rich for me is the blending of tradition and also, you might say, cutting edge activism, in terms of bringing more justice into this world. So I also I'm involved with the Hebrew school because I take my grandson Aiden to the classes. He's in Jackson's class and in the Hebrew school. And I have to say, one of the greatest joys for me is sitting with him and practicing reading Hebrew and learning that the language that goes back 4,000 years. And learning the alphabet and how to read it. And so I get to do that. And then I think like something as powerful as the tent of Abraham, and just that imagery to bring up the idea of Abraham, who's the common father of both the Jewish people and the Muslim people, which really just emphasize that we're all children of God and we're all brothers and sisters trying to figure out how to live in this world.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because, as I said, we did a show a couple weeks back and Jim Weller was here. Jim, great guy, and was talking about the tent of Abraham and kind of the inclusiveness of that kind of thing. For myself, I'm a member of the Association of Faith Communities, which actually runs the Faith Community Shelter. And although I'm not a faith person myself, I learned so much by talking to people in the different religions and the things, people particularly who are doing great social justice work. We had a woman here who is a representative of the Voices of local Muslim faith here. And it was wonderful to hear her talk about how that is emerging now in Santa Cruz, where there is emphasis on combating Islamophobia, and the voices of the Muslim faith need to be heard and are being heard in the community. And that's the kind of thing that I can support, even as a person, who, not necessarily a faith person, but somebody who does believe in the righteousness of those kinds of things. It
It says in one of our own wisdom literature, something called Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our ancestors. Who is wise? One who learns from everyone. So it's really important for us to maintain that openness. It doesn't mean we're all the same.
Right.
It does mean that we have something to learn from and even with each other. And I feel like we're in an era where we especially have access to those things, and at the same time we really need it.
Yes.
We really need it.
And it's interesting to me, you were talking about the Faith Community Shelter. This evening, we had it at Peace United Church, and we did have a visit, I think, last week from Louise and Phil and Lynn Rose from Hadashimene. They came and did that. Wonderful. You know, it's just great to see them. But, you know, there's an example of a congregation, David Grishaw Jones, who is a great social justice advocate himself. You know? And he, I think, believes in creating as big a tent as possible. And sometimes that has created some bumps in the road for him, but nevertheless he perseveres and he does that. And I think he's a great champion of that kind of thing.
Yes, he is. We've worked with him on many things. Originally, we had some study sessions together, which grew into a series we did between our two congregations, which was wonderful. At one point, we had a series called "Everything You Wanted to Ask the Other Religion, but We're Afraid to."
Oh, that's wonderful!
It was really a lot.
You should
of fun.
do that again. That's fascinating. That's exactly what.
It was great, and actually, enough trust had been built by that point for people to ask real questions, maybe questions of theology or other things that might feel too controversial at other times.
I would say I attended a few of those that Reb Eli led together with Reverend David. And just sitting in a room with the Christian congregation and the Jewish congregation, and then we broke up into small groups, and then we got a chance to sort of share with each other. I mean, it was very healing in a way.
We did stuff together at Dominican Oaks, for example. Actually, one of the things, and Baruch was involved in this, we did a series together where we presented, I think it was 8 weeks, about healing and wellness within faith traditions.
Interesting.
And so 1 week was Jewish and 1 week was Christian, but we had Buddhist, we had
I
Hindu,
presented on Chinese,
That's right,
from the Chinese tradition.
And that was a wonderful thing we did. Right now we're emphasizing with other communities, but we meet at the Vets Hall, as I mentioned, currently, and the community that meets before us is Reverend Beverly Brooke and her husband Stoney.
I know Beverly well. I serve on a couple of different committees with her. I know Stoney well.
Awesome
We,
people.
in fact, just did the Santa Cruz Veterans Community Dinner there on Thursday for Thanksgiving, and wonderful folks. And he has the pop-up ministry they do on Friday
Pop-up
evenings.
Peace? Well, they meet the hour before us.
Okay, well,
So
there you go.
a
So people
couple
can
of
come a little
times-
hour earlier. And
We've had that. We've had people come,
is that
stay,
right?
and join it.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
a couple of times we did stuff with them. That's new, but I just love them to pieces. And the most recent thing we did was just about a week and a half ago or so.
On Veterans Day.
Veterans Day, right? So
Yeah.
we had our Friday night service. The two communities came together, and we honored vets who are in our communities as well as those who are involved at the Vets Hall by hearing from them, their stories. We had fairly recent vets, people involved at the Vets Hall. We had a Blue Star mom. We also had a man in his 90s who is a veteran not only of World War II but of the liberation of Dachau. And so it was very powerful to hear from them, as well as a vet from Israel and someone who was from Russia. And so that's an example of something we want to do together to honor veterans. We're at the Vets Hall and connect with Papa Peace, who is also there. And I have to say, we had two very famous people with us.
And they were?
Leonard Cohen and Leonard Bernstein.
Is that right?
My father's name is Leonard Cohen. And the Dachau vet is Lenny
Oh,
Bernstein.
be doggone.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned weaving through this the issue of wellness, and essentially, I speak to that a little bit. Kindle. You have a vegan restaurant, you know, and certainly you believe in that, that kind of vitality of life that you can achieve through that kind of diet. So I'm sure that weaves its way somehow through Hadashimene as well.
Yeah, I think even though by extension also to the larger Santa Cruz community, but clearly just with the social action of Jewish renewal and the progressiveness and the openness, to make the world better, and the tikkun olam, aspect of it, it makes sense, that when I was going to open that restaurant, that I would definitely go into that arena where it's gluten free. But it's also interesting because our motto for Veg on the Edge is compassion. So
Is that right?
so in other words,
Yeah.
even though yes we are vegan, but ours is not to pass judgment, because majority of us, 90% of our family members are meat eaters. So for us, we know the only way we make change in the world, like Jewish renewal, is through love. We love people into change. So it's not about judgment, it's not about anything. So when you come to even Veg on the Edge, for example, you don't find any message that's negative. We just merely, serve food that people can eat. And I think for me, that's the way that I see Jewish renewal. It is this non-judgmental, very, very open, very progressive, very embracing place. So that's a parallel that I draw between what Jewish renewal does and the way we function as a
Well, yours
restaurant.
is certainly a fascinating journey from Germany to Nigeria to the United States, and weaving, as I say, through all that Hadeshimenu and meeting wonderful folks here. And Gary, you were going to say something. It looked like you had a thought on your mind there you're going to share with us.
Yeah, but I think...
She's a good host. I'm always going to, it's like a good bartender. You keep some conversation.
No, I was reflecting on when we were talking about the service we had with the vets, the power of hearing people's stories and that openness. In fact, I think we're teaching an adult ed that's called Sharing Our Stories, or is that right? Or
it's called the work of the soul, the work of the world, but it's about our stories, our personal stories, and how they play out in the work we do.
Yeah, and so I'm reflecting on those classes that include members of the Peace United Church and Kadeshimenu, and to sit in small groups and hear each other's stories, like how what turns you on and spiritually, and what gives meaning to your life, and to just share how that breaks down barriers and gets people connected. And I often think if only we can get the Israelis and Palestinians sitting down and hearing and really hearing each other's stories and hearing each perspective on the state of affairs, it would go such a long way toward healing that conflict.
And even locally, I think if there's a contrast analogy to be drawn, as Louise knows, being an activist for the houseless community, Annette March, is a wonderful woman around town, did oral histories of people experiencing homelessness. And oral histories of people experiencing homelessness. And she would go listen to the stories, people telling their stories. And if those people could tell their stories to other residents, to mainstream people in Santa Cruz who may not ever encounter a homeless person other than somebody they see downtown or now in the benchlands, wouldn't that be a wonderful meeting of the minds and hearts, to be able to say, oh, I want to hear your story. It's not, who you are, where you are now, but how did you get here? What's your journey? And that's the kind of thing I think that you're talking about. That's so wonderful and really so needed in Santa Cruz, but fortunately for all of us, not a unique experience in Santa Cruz. There's much of that.
Yeah.
I would like to say something else about
Please.
the congregation.
Yeah.
Women are honored. Women are well represented there in the congregation. And our viewpoint is important. And that is very, very different from so many congregations that I've been involved with. And you don't leave your intellect at the door when you walk in. You're very much engaged, and there's no dogma that you have to adhere to. Questioning is allowed, it's encouraged. And so it's so inclusive for people who have studied with other faith traditions. It's inclusive for women who are really marginalized in so many ways in our society.
Yes, indeed.
And I want to put in a word for our Bible study too.
Absolutely.
Which is just wonderful. You find so much depth, so much subtlety, and our rabbi has a depth of understanding that I have never seen anywhere else. and I so appreciate the mysticism that he's able to explain, because so much of the literature came out of mysticism in the first place, and I think you have to understand that in order to understand Judaism.
It's interesting to me, how, again, using the word, kind of weaving this tapestry in Santa Cruz, because Dora Shuey, who is on our board for the ACLU, also does work with Jewish Voices for Peace. And certainly we see groups in town, the Palestinian Justice Committee, people like that. There is just a lot of discussion about how peace can be made. Is it made through the heart? Is it made through understanding? Is it made through the outreach and the things like how Shemenu does, and crusades and pioneers and leads? And I think it's very important.
My personal belief is that there are many doorways, and so for some it's through social action, for some it's through the interpersonal, for some it's through get involved in national organizations. My mother was very involved in cancer activism, and I remember us having this discussion because there are some people who really want to devote the energy to giving nationally for, let's say, for research. There are some who want to devote their energy into bringing a meal or bringing a wig or whatever it was needed to people locally. And I think that's one of the things, because we're a small community, for me it's important to have a broad tent. Politically, for example, the vast majority of our membership, I'm sure, leans progressive. But I want it to be a safe space for, it can't be everybody, but as many people as possible to be there, especially since there's so few places to go as a Jewish community. There are more now in Santa Cruz, but there's a limit of choices, and I want them to feel safe and comfortable in our community across that political spectrum. One of the things that Louise just mentioned, by the way, was the Torah study, the Bible study. And I just want to say, because you had asked about ways people can connect.
Absolutely, of course.
Because we're downtown, we're pretty accessible. And Friday night at 7:45 is when we meet. It's a little late because Reverend Beverly's just before us.
Okay, yeah.
But on the first Fridays of the month, we've been especially emphasizing studying together. So there'll be a song or two to create a service, as it were, a container at the beginning and end. But the bulk of our hour together is looking into some of the text and seeing how it might inspire us in our own lives. It can't be just left there, but what do we learn from it? And the answer is going to be different for each of us, right? I have a friend who once taught, gave a teaching, and every so often she punctuated by chanting, "The Torah is a mirror for us. What is she trying to say?" And then you'd pause and you go, right, what is this really saying to us? And what I get out of it and what you get out of it may be different, but that's the approach we're trying to take. So Friday night, if people want to come, 7:45.
Well, and it's wonderful to be able to create the kind of atmosphere where these discussions can take place. And take place without fear, without any doubt that your voice is going to be heard, this voice is going to be appreciated, because that's oftentimes what happens with the dissident voice. They don't feel like they're being heard. So it's a problem.
I think we have a kind of a knack for sort of being willing to stay with the question and not rush to a quick answer, or and especially if you're wrestling with. The Yisrael, the name of the Jewish people means wrestler with God. So the idea of wrestling with these eternal questions and wrestling with what's the meaning of life and why are we here and what's the purpose, if you raise questions that go that deep, there isn't a quick answer. And of course, each person has to discover their own answer to that question. And I think, for me, Kaddish Yemenu creates a container where it's safe to be in that question and just kind of hang out with it and see what comes. Listen to dreams, listen to poetry, listen to other ways of finding your truth. Rather than many I guess religious organizations have their truth, and then it becomes, dogmatic. It becomes, and there isn't a lot of room for real sharing and real exploration. So that's anyway one of the things I really value.
Good description of how that kind of transformation can take place in society, and particularly in our community. It's important. important work. Tell us again, as we're getting closer, not close yet, but closer to the end. Really, I want to mention your fundraiser again, so people would get that in mind. It's very, love to see it.
Season of Light, Sunday, December 17th at the Kumbwa Jazz Center. Our guest performers, Elisa Feynman and Kimball Hurd. Beautiful, beautiful music. And I can't, you can go online, I suppose, and I think you can find them pretty easily and listen to their sound. And it's absolutely beautiful. Some of you may have seen them perform up at the Kate Wolf Music Festival.
Oh, my.
Yeah. They're there many years. And it's an opportunity for us to really share in a celebration with the community. I might as well put in a plug too for our friends down at the Watsonville Multicultural celebration.
Sure.
Because for the third year in a row, Haresha Menu is blessed to participate there. We, just before the Christmas tree lighting or the holiday tree lighting, we'll do a sort of a model menorah lighting and sing some songs in Ladino. Ladino, you could call it the Yiddish of the Sephardic Jews. Ladino is a Judeo-Spanish language that went with the Jews who were exiled from Spain over 500 years ago. And it went with these exile communities all around North Africa, the Middle East, and many Americans of Spanish descent, meaning many people who are Latino and of mixed heritage, have hidden family traditions that still hold some of this language or some of the family traditions that were brought with them from Spain. When I sang down there last time, I had people come up to me and say that their families had this sort of hidden Jewish background.
Were they relating their stories to you?
Yes. And most of them are Mexican or Mexican-American Catholic families, but there are family stories, things that were hidden. And Ladino is the name of that language. It sounds very much like Spanish, though it's closer to a medieval Spanish, as I understand it. And so we'll sing a couple of songs in that language as well.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that you are engaging in Watsonville. I have a very fondness for Watsonville, although I do live in Santa Cruz. We spend a lot of time in Watsonville. We just did Watsonville Connect, which is a service fair for the homeless folks. We do 2 a year, one in Santa Cruz, one in Watsonville. Watsonville is a great, warm, welcoming community. It is terrific from the top where there are elected officials with whom I do some work, all the way down to community activists. They are wonderful people.
Yeah, it's really important for us to at least maintain some connection. We're primarily here in Santa Cruz, and most of our folks are Santa Cruz or Aptos, but we want to make sure to keep that connection to Watsonville. And there is a small group of people called the Pajaro Valley Jewish Community that are trying to do that work, maintain that connection. They'll have a Hanukkah booth with the little dreidels, the little tops for Hanukkah for the kids.
So we've got a couple more minutes. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for being here and really enlightening not only me, but our audience, and all of Santa Cruz County will be listening into this and then watching it again as we play it several times more. And really learned a lot, just not about Hadesh Menu, but the tent of Abraham, but the larger tent of where we all are spiritually, I think, and as progressive activists. So we've got about another minute. Gary, just a word of welcome as we go out to Hadesh Menu.
Well, I think of a line from Rumi: when you do things from your soul, you feel a spirit moving in you, a joy.
I love that. Thank you. Akindele, thank you so much for being here. Best of luck on your restaurant. I'm sure everybody give us the name again.
Veg on the Edge.
It's Abbott Square. Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. Louise Drummond, always a pleasure to see you. And the good rabbi.
Thank you so much.
And Rabbi Yelakon, a great pleasure. You're dearest to me, so I will greet you as warmly as I feel you. Thank you all for being here. This has been a wonderful show. It's terrific. Before we leave, I really want to remind people to go to the fundraiser again. Go to the website. Let's in fact just mention for the brief one we have that fundraiser again. We really want people to get engaged.
Thank you. Yes, Elisa Feynman and Kimball Hurd at the Kumbwa Jazz Center on Sunday, December 17th. It's an afternoon concert, and families are most welcome to come. And we want to thank you also for this opportunity.
Great pleasure. Yeah.
It's been really something. Maybe you'll join me. We'll chant to return again as we leave. return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to what you are, return to who you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again, return again, return again, return to the land of your soul.
That's just wonderful. Once again, Gary Baruch Dalowitz, Dr. Gary Kindele Bankole. Thank you so much, Louise Drummond, again. Always a pleasure. And Rabbi Eli Cohen. This has been Voice from the Village. Tune in again in a couple of weeks. We'll have another show, as you know, and as I mentioned at the top of the show, this is Santa Cruz County's longest running live issues program. It's been here for 17 years. The late, great Charlie Phillips was the champion of this kind of programming, where people could look in from the community and learn things about Hadesh Amenu and learn things that are going on in the community that they may not otherwise have been aware of. So keep tuning into community television. You'll get lots more of this. Not quite so much of me, if you, but get some of me anyway. But anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will be seeing you down the road. Once more, Hadesh Amenu. Just give us the website.
Sure. CY, if you remember the letter CY.
CY, okay.
CYSantaCruz.com.
Okay.
You can feel free to call me also at 831-295-8467, 831-295-8467, or come visit us Friday night
There
at
you
the
go.
Vets Hall,
All right.
745.
Okay. And please give that a look and a feel if you have a Friday evening. Of course, Beverly Brook, wonderful with their mission there. But check out Hadesh Amenu. I have learned much this evening, been touched by this, and learned something that my friends Rabbi Phil and Louise have imparted to me in a while. So we're going to see you later. And so good night, and that's all for us.
Thank you.
Okay.